It is a moment of light, surrounded on all sides by darkness and oblivion. In the entire history of the universe, let alone in your own history, there has never been another just like it, and there will never be another just like it again. It is the point to which all of your yesterdays have been leading since the hour of your birth. It is the point from which all of your tomorrows will proceed until the hour of your death. If you were aware of how precious it is, you could hardly live through it. Unless you are aware of how precious it is, you can hardly be said to be living at all. This is the day which the Lord has made, says the 118th Psalm. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Or weep and be sad in it, for that matter. The point is to see it for what it is, because it will be gone before you know it. If you waste it, it is your life you are wasting. If you look the other way, it may be the moment you've been waiting for always that you have missed. All other days have either disappeared into darkness and oblivion or not yet emerged from them. Today is the only day there is. My reading comes from a book called A Girl Named Zippy by Haven Kimmel. It's an autobiographical reflection on her growing up in the Midwest, and she went on to get a Master's of Divinity degree. I don't think she practices in the ministry, but she has some interesting reflections on how religion shaped her. And she tells this story about when she was a little girl and a conversation with her father. Her father was not a church-going man. The mother was there all the time. So there's some interesting tales to be told there. So this is an excerpt. One evening, as my father and I sat on the porch swing, generally not talking, just swinging, I asked him, "Daddy, why ain't you a Christian?" He gave me the one eyebrow without looking at me. "Who says I'm not?" "Everybody." Yeah, well, they're right. We went on swinging, and sometimes conversations with him only went so far. The next morning, he woke me up pretty early, which made me think we were going fishing. But instead, he announced that we were going to his church. Now, I could see this was nothing but a trick, because my dad wouldn't belong to any church that would have him. And it wasn't even a Sunday anyhow. "Do I have to wear a dress?" I asked, already miserable. "Nope, just pull on your jeans." And we drove out of Moorland and down the highway toward a little town called Dunruth. We didn't get as far to Dunruth, though, before he turned off the highway into a campground called Lake of the Woods. It wasn't the campground we ever stayed in. It was too close to home, too close to the highway. But he drove through it like he knew it, and some of the permanent residents, the people who lived in their little trailers, waved at him in that kind of familiar way. We wound around the campsites and then back a narrow, rutted road that went right deep into the woods. And I kept looking at him, waiting for an explanation, but he was silent. When the road ended, we got out of the truck and followed a well-worn trail. It wasn't long before we had reached a large, round clearing. The perimeter was marked by big logs set in the ground, perfect for sitting. And at the front of the clearing, on what appeared to be the front, at least by the way the eye was drawn to it, was a cross made of huge, gnarled trees. Dad sat on one of the logs, and I sat next to him. "This is my church," he said, waving vaguely at the woods surrounding us. "Daddy, this is a campground." So it ain't a proper church. This is just where people come when they're away from home. What kind of services do they hold? I don't know. I never come when there are other people here. Then that settles it. To have a church, you have to have people. A preacher, an altar, some fans for waving when it's hot. Is that all? No, you gotta have some hankies. You know Hazel Deckard? She can fold up a hanky with her thumb inside so it looks like the swaddling Jesus. He thought for a moment about how completely I knew a real church. What does the Bible say about 2 or 3 gathered together, he asked. Not like in Sunday school where everything was a quiz, but like maybe he just forgot. Where 2 or 3 are gathered together, there I am also. Dad could sometimes get a smarty pants look on his face, which I wouldn't have ever been allowed to do myself. It was a look that said that people were just regularly walking into his traps. Does it say 2 or 3 what? He asked, looking me in the eye. And I thought, well, of course it meant people, but that's not what it said. I shook my head. Are there 2 or 3 something out here, he asked, gesturing around us. I nodded, and yeah, there are 2 or 3 trees, and 2 or 3 bugs, and 2 or 3 flowers, and us, of course. Then this is where God is. I leaned against his arm. He was wrong about the Bible, and I knew it just as well as I knew all of the books of the New Testament in order. Christians were flat out strict about how everything got read, and nothing was to be scrummed around unless it was by a preacher. This was a nice place. It was peaceful. I was glad that Dad had a church of his own somewhere. And his cigarette smoke hung blue in the air all around us. Defining reverence is something of a challenge because primarily at its source, reverence is a feeling. And feelings are easier recognized and felt than necessarily defined to everyone's liking. Reverence, to seek its definition, is kind of like trying to define love. We think we know what it means, and we might be able to tell someone else about love. And then one day we are graced with a deeper, fuller experience of love and realize that before we didn't really understand love at all. Authentic, deep reverence is very much like that. But of course, I'll try to construct with words a frame, at least, around that feeling, leaving the composition within the frame to be created by your own images, your own personal reference, your own personal experiences. The analogy isn't perfect, but I can't help think of the Supreme Court's definition of pornography. You know, the one that says they'd know it when they see it. Reverence is a lot like that. Well, not like pornography, no. It's like that in that we will know it when we feel it. And I guess I trust that none of us here this morning is completely without some sort of reference point, some memory deep within us of an encounter with reverence at some point and place in our lives. It is in so many ways, an essential dimension of what it means for us to be religious beings. We gather together in a spiritual community, not always with the intention of becoming reverent, but to place ourselves in the proximity of other people who might either remind us of something that we seek, or where the experience of being together in worship might restore a sense of reverence to our own personal journey. In the classical philosophical traditions, reverence is a virtue, one of the great virtues. Reverence thus has an ethical component, equally as important as its spiritual groundings. Reverence, like love, another virtue, has meaning in the abstract. But it only becomes meaningful when it's woven deeply into the experiences of our lived daily lives, our own doing, our own being. One can certainly act reverent, but that doesn't mean they are expressing reverence. Reverence is not always obvious to others around us. In general, it's good advice to be a little bit suspicious of people who are most anxious to demonstrate their reverence to us. If nothing else, reverence requires at least a modest sense of humility. Reverence, at least as I have come to understand it, is a well-developed capacity to have feelings of awe, feelings of deep respect, of wordless wonder even. In that place of reverence, we stand ourselves alone before the created world with a silent recognition of our place in the greater scheme of things. It's why humility is such an essential part of reverence. We feel something. To flesh that out a bit, we might know everything there is possible to know about astronomy, let's say. Maybe it was our college major. Maybe Carl Sagan was our hero. But when we lie down on our backs on the lawn on a summer night to watch a meteor shower, what we know somehow in that lived experience, all that is bottled up in the place of knowledge, recedes in importance in some ways. It becomes somehow less important than what we feel. To be witness to worlds beyond our knowing, and to be aware of that endless mystery, and to recognize, even for a fleeting moment, the infinitesimal odds of our having been here at all. Know it all you want, but it's not until it's felt, really felt, that we begin to grasp the truest meanings of reverence. I aspire to the spirit of reverence that resonates in the poetry of Mary Oliver. And this particular poem leapt to thought as I was thinking about this. The poem's called Making the House Ready for the Lord. More traditional language than Mary Oliver often uses. But bear with me. Dear Lord, I have swept and I have washed, but still nothing is as shining as it should be for you. Under the sink, for example, is an uproar of mice. This is the season of their many children. What shall I do? And under the eaves and through the walls, the squirrels have gnawed their ragged entrances. But it is the season when they need shelter. So what shall I do? And the raccoon limps into the kitchen and opens the cupboard while the dog snores. The cat hugs the pillow. What shall I do? Beautiful is the new snow falling in the yard and the fox who is staring boldly up the path to the door. And still I believe you will come. Lord, will you? When I speak to the fox, the sparrow, the lost dog, and the shivering sea goose, will you know that I am really speaking to you whenever I say, as I do all morning and afternoon, come in, come in. I need to add that reverence is not encompassed by awe alone. Awe at all that is greater than us and beyond us, in which we live in a state of dependence. Reverence incorporates a profound respect as well for the elements of creation which we may think of as somehow lesser, like the mice underneath the kitchen sink. Reverence requires a balance of awe and respect. As one writer noted, reverence begins in a deep understanding of human limitations. And from this grows the capacity to be in awe of whatever we believe lives outside of our control. God, truth, justice, nature, even death. The capacity for awe, as it grows, brings with it a capacity for respecting fellow human beings, flaws and all. With that reverence, we are reminded that we are not the supreme being. And without reverence, we lose track of our humanity. This seems the greater crisis facing the planet today, a loss of that profound reverence that has eroded a sense of awe for many, that sense of awe in which awe for all that we in this universe did not create, and of course that we could never replace. And that has reduced in so many ways our respect for things lesser than ourselves, which we use and abuse to meet our own needs. There are endless challenges, of course, facing the planet. Global warming, economic justice, environmental exploitation, hunger, disease. I'm not so naive as to anyway suggest that all we need to do is more reverence in the world alone. But at the same time, I'm convinced that none of those problems and challenges that face us will ever be resolved without some sort of deepened, heightened expressions of reverence among us. It's why it seems so essential to me that we make space in our lives consciously for reverence, and why we might consciously set a place for reverence at the table of our own lives. There are a couple of things about reverence that give me a sense of hope in the capacity for reverence to meet the challenges of the times we live in. Even though I am speaking of reverence in a religious setting, and even though many people may confuse a state of reverence with being in worship, in reality, and this may seem a strange thing for me to say, reverence does not belong to religion. Reverence belongs to the human community. It is about a universal, shared human experience or feeling which challenges us and changes us. Not because we are Unitarian Universalists or Muslims or pagans or Presbyterians, but simply and most basically because we're humans. No one holds the franchise on what reverence represents. It connects every far corner of the web to the other. An image that's helpful in considering the impact of reverence. It's this feeling, it's not a belief. And somehow it has gotten tangled up with a certain image of what it means to be religious, which is wrapped up in behaviors that people think of as reverent, solemn, serious, humorless, calmly assured. But that is not reverence. Any one of us can experience profound reverence, and at the same time, not know what to believe or be sure of what we believe. Or a feeling of reverence may challenge and change our beliefs. But either way, reverence doesn't depend on a sense of faith to exist. And because of that, it seems like reverence has the greatest potential of almost anything to be fostered as a bridge between faith traditions in this world. A means that we might bridge the ever-widening gap between the religious and the secular worldview. Because reverence does not require a common scripture. It doesn't demand a shared ritual. It doesn't expect a mutual history that all can agree on, or even does it require a compatible theology. All it requires, and this is not insignificant, is a recognition of the shared feeling of awe, which is at the foundation of reverence. It's something that transcends faith, not because it's more important, but because it is more essential. Albert Schweitzer wrote of this a century ago. A devoted Lutheran, he reflected in his book, Out of My Life and Thought, his philosophy around the reverence for life. He wrote this: if one wishes to reach clear notions about oneself and one's relation to the world, one must ever again and again reflect upon the first, the most immediate, and the continually given fact of one's own consciousness. Only if we start from our own consciousness can we arrive at a thinking worldview. The beginning of thought, a beginning which continually repeats itself, is that we do not simply accept our existence as something given, but experience it as something unfathomably mysterious. Life affirmation is the spiritual act by which we cease to live unreflectively and begin to devote ourselves to our life with reverence in order to raise it to its true value. To affirm life is to deepen, to make more inward, and to exalt the will to live. One who has become a thinking being feels a compulsion to give to every will to live the same reverence for life that we would give to our own. But before the world can fully share that consciousness of reverence, we have to know it deeply and truly for ourselves. I have not a doubt in my mind that every single one of you here have images and memories of reverence that quickly come to mind when you think of what that means to you. Experiences which may have happened decades ago, or maybe this morning, which resonate over time deeply within you. Maybe around the birth of a child, sitting in a clearing in a forest with your dad, standing under the power of a waterfall, a profound moment of intimacy, the witnessing of a death. I don't imagine I have to point them out to you. I suspect they found you long before I started to mention them. Reverence may or may not be harder to experience than it was in the past. I don't know. It may just be our misguided nostalgia that makes it seem like the pilgrims were so full of reverence. For all we know, they might have been really ticked off that the new world was such a bummer. They might have wished that the native people had brought Yorkshire pudding instead of roasted corn. Who knows, but we like to imagine them more aware of reverence than we are. That should change. It's almost Thanksgiving, and this is as good an excuse as any for us to practice reverence, to draw upon what we have known of reverence from our own experience, and to give it room in our lives now. With Mary Oliver, perhaps, the pending holiday might provide us with our own unique encounters with reverence. So I invite you to be on the lookout for it, to maybe set a place for it at your own table, and to be prepared for it when you least expect it. So open the door and say, "Come in, come in."